Section 4 in your lab guide. And I don't know if the Word page numbers are the same as PDF. In Word, it's 35. So it would be somewhere when around page 35 in your lab guides. We're going to start out today with registering our two instances, connecting them. Remember, as we go through this, this is really a lot about what the motivation for Service Bridge was in developing Service Bridge. There are other options for connecting instances. Integration Hub has a remote instance spoke. There are other spokes that will connect instances. Certainly third-party products out there that will connect instances. A lot of service providers, they have a standard message bus kind of connector that will connect instances. But all those take time and they cost a lot of money in most cases to put them in place. Our primary intent up front with Service Bridge was to have a method that we could quickly connect instances together. And I think several of you in here have experience with Service Bridge. You know the connection. There can be issues, but when the instances are clean and the use cases have been tested beforehand, the connection goes pretty quickly, as I hope you'll see here. All right, so we're going to start out on the provider instance. So if you will go to your provider instance and log in as admin if you are not already, and we start out with going into the Service Bridge for Providers application and consumer registrations. And it should be empty unless you've moved ahead already in your guide. We'll do a new to create a new registration. The company we're going to connect to is Boxio. So type that into company. It should data fill your company contact automatically, your primary contact for Boxio. Contact is Julie Lewis. Now, one thing that's new in the February version of Service Bridge, when in the December release, when the platform team was addressing some of the security concerns that were out there, they made a change that required us to introduce or reintroduce key management framework into the Service Bridge application to manage the passing of data between the two instances. And we had, as we talked about up front yesterday when we ran the KMF diagnostics, that KMF can be problematic sometimes. It's not always set up correctly. It's not always initialized on instances. And we were having enough problems that the team took the time to develop a Service Bridge specific encryption. And that is the default. So under encryption type, you'll see Service Bridge AES 256. That's now the default encryption. That's what we recommend. Key management framework is still there. If people want to use it for whatever reason, they have security reasons, but we recommend that the Service Bridge encryption be used. So we'll leave that alone. And then the other thing that has to be put in is the URL for the customer or the consumer instance. So I'm going to go over to my consumer instance and I'm just going to copy https through.com. And we'll go back and put that in the URL field. And that's it. You can put a description in if you want. You don't have to. And then we'll save. And you'll see that creates a registration record. Now, one thing I forgot to mention before I hit save, use the save button. I think, those of you who are familiar with ServiceNow, you've been using it a while, you may automatically right click in the header and choose save from the pop-up. That will cause problems if you do a save from the pop-up, because the save UI action on the page actually has some initialization things that it does. So it's and that's something the team's working on fixing, so we avoid that issue. But that's something to remember. Always use the save UI action when you save a registration. All right. So it's going to kick. Sure.
I have a
Go ahead.
there. If you scroll a little bit up on your right-hand side registration, so the company and the contact, as per the document that you share, so the company has to be exist on the consumer side as well, right? So if you see 4.1 section 4.1 on your left-hand side, the
Yeah.
consumer company must exist in the provider instance, and the same company should exist on the consumer side as well.
Well, the company is the consumer, so that the consumer is your company. Yes.
So is the SysID, is it necessary that SysID should also be same? Is it like you'll have to import the company record from your consumer and keep it in producer instance? Is it like that?
No. No.
So is it just the name? So uh, like having the same company name is enough, or is the
Yes.
SysID also match?
Yes. This ID does not have to be the same. Company name is fine.
Okay.
Doesn't the contact have to be the same though? Like you have to, when you go to register with that instance, like you have to do it as Julie Lewis in this example.
Yes, the contact has to be the same. You guys will see that in a second. But the
Okay.
sys ID does not come into play.
So it's just that with the same name, the company should exist on both the instances and even the contact. So
Yes, but remember, I mean, so the company name is the name of the company you're registering with. So yes, that company name would exist on the consumer instance.
okay. So if you scroll a little bit down on left hand side on the PDF, so this is the registration part. Once this is done, while registering consumer, so with the link that we have it in the activity notes of the registration task, so the company that we are going to give on the consumer side is going to be Solana. So why is it like here we are choosing the Boxio, and on the consumer side, while creating a provider record, I mean on the consumer side, we are choosing a different company name.
Because
So
the provider is Solano and the consumer is Boxio. They're two different companies. So on the provider is Solano. That is the name of the provider company. And Boxio is the name of the consumer company. So the provider is Solano, the consumer is Boxio. And here on the provider instance, we're saying the company we want to connect with is Boxio, is the consumer.
okay. Yeah. So
Got it?
got it. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, Phil, Shashank here. So for the registration, with old habit, I did do a right-click save. Do you recommend I delete and redo it again?
Let's see what happens. Did it proceed?
Yeah, it went through fine.
Okay. Good. I don't know that it always causes issues. Where you will see a potential issue is as we progress, as the registration task progresses, but we'll see when we get there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Once you hit on the save button, it should ideally trigger a flow. So in the back end, so if you go to the flow designer executions, you should be able to find a flow. So if that didn't got triggered, you'll have to delete this record and you'll have to recreate it.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks. All right. So you can see when it created the registration record and it progressed, it gives the registration details and it gives a link. So go ahead and copy that link into your buffer, because we will use that in a minute. So copy that and hold there. an environment where email is enabled, in these Cloud Labs instances, the email wasn't enabled, so I can't show you, but it would send an email to the contact. So typically what I do in a demo, if I've got a demo instance, I will make sure that email sending is enabled and that the Julie Lewis contact has notifications enabled, because that's the other thing is if notifications for Julie Lewis are turned off, it won't send. And then I will go to system emails. And you'll see that there's an email in here that you can then preview, and you can show the user when you're demoing it a preview of the email. But since email sending is not enabled on this instance, it did not send. So those are the two options. If email sending is enabled, you can pull up the email and you can show the user will get an email. The contact that you've identified will get an email. It'll have instructions about authentication, and it will actually have a connect button at the bottom of the email. That is essentially what you just copied here. We know in pre-prod, email is not going to be enabled in a lot of cases. So what you would do as an administrator is you copy that link and send it to the contact so they can use it. Okay, so make sure you've copied that link. I'll do it again just to make sure. And then we're going to move on to the consumer actions. So to complete the connection, the customer contact has to be logged in to the provider instance. Now, we get questions all the time about the what kind of user, what kind of login do they have to have? You'll see if we didn't, maybe we skipped a section. Hold on just a second. Did we skip no, we didn't. So we'll look at roles in a few minutes, but the customer contact on the provider instance just has to have an external role, and they have to have a role called SN_SB requester. And consumer, I'm sorry, not requester. So it's here in the notes, SN_SB pro consumer. If they have that role, they can log in. They don't have to have access to anything else. They just have to have that role. Then they will be able to complete the registration action. I think a lot of customers, when we talk about, the customer contact has to be logged into their instance, they get really concerned about exposure and what kind of login that needs to be. So that's the only role it needs to have. So we are going to impersonate Julie Lewis on the provider instance. And then I'm just going to go back to my consumer instance. You can do this in a new window. You don't have to be on your consumer instance, but you need to be logged into your consumer instance as admin. And I'll just put that, I'm going to copy and paste, or I'm going to paste that link, that connect link that I copied a few minutes ago into my browser. And it's going to open a new provider record.
We are pasting in the browser with the consumer instance, right?
Yeah, but you can do it in any window. It's still going to go to the same place. But if you did it in another window, if you're not logged in as admin, you'd have to log in. And this takes a minute sometimes. It's going to open up a provider connection record. Now, so maybe this goes to the question we had a little while ago. So remember, you've created a registration on the provider and you enter the consumer that you're going to connect with. Now you're on the consumer and you're saying, okay, I'm going to make a provider connection. What is the provider company that I want to connect with? And remember at the beginning when we created that provider record, that provider record identifies the provider to the consumer. So we're going to enter Solana. Oh, what did I do? I got in too much of a hurry. Okay, hit the home key. Let's try that again. There we go. All right, let's try that again. So I'm going to enter Solana as the provider company. And I'm going to save. So we created a provider connection. We did a save of the provider connection, and then you're given the connect to provider button. And I just got a note from Ryan that he will be on in just a minute. So we'll verify with him the SysID question when he comes on. All right. So we will choose the connect to provider button.
Hey, Phil, the sysids do match between these two instances for company.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
But remember, these are duplicate demo instances. The data is the same on both. So I think that's a coincidence, not a requirement.
Okay.
These instances were all they're all spun up with the same demo data, the same image, except for the service bridge applications.
Yep. You're right.
All right. So we did connect. It asked to authenticate. We authenticate. And then it asks for permission to connect the two instances. And we will allow. And then we submit the registration. All right, now this is the waiting part. So you will see it takes a little time. You'll see the registration task. We'll go from open to work in progress, and then finally to close complete. So there are some service bridge roles that you want people to have. Now, in the lab guide, we're going in and actually adding the roles, but in practice, you wouldn't want to add roles to groups. So you'd want to have groups that you would add these roles to. So you're not adding a role for each individual user. But for demo purposes, we will add. So we're going to go to the users and search for Julie Lewis. What we're doing up front is clean up because it was something that, remember, we talked about before, because we're spinning up duplicate instances. Julie is an external user on all instances. So she's an external user on both the provider and consumer instance, just because that's the way we had to spin the instances up. So the first thing we need to do is, so that Julie will work as an internal user on the consumer instance, is just clean that up. It was easier to have you guys fix that than to try to fix it in the images that we have in Cloud Lab. So this is not something you would normally have to do, but we're doing it just so that the labs will work here. So hopefully it doesn't confuse anyone. Hey, Ryan, while we're doing this, one of the questions that came up is when you register, you put in the consumer name on the provider side. You put in the provider name on the or the provider name on the consumer side in the provider record. Those have to be in the company tables. The question was, do the sysids need to match? So does the Boxio sysid need to match on the provider side and vice versa? And the answer we gave was no, but I told him we'd wait till you got on and ask. And
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, it's really just a representation of how that connection, that provider is going to show up within the instance. So they don't need to be, both the customer record on the provider side and the provider record on the customer side. They do not need to match.
Yeah. And I know this has changed between versions of Service Bridge. And I'm not sure where it's at this point. The Solana, when you put in on the consumer side, you put in the provider name. Does it matter what the provider name is? I know you'd want it to match so that you know what you're looking at, right? But does it really matter? Does it actually?
No, it really doesn't matter.
Record now? Okay.
Yeah, you could change it to whatever company you want to represent that provider. And then that's just going to be used as, how it shows up as that provider connection in the backend administration. And then for remote record producers, that will also show up as to the categorization by the default category when it goes into the catalog. So, there's no direct connection between the two instances. So on the, when you have that provider come in, you could select whatever you want to represent them.
Yeah.
So if you have internal, abbreviation for what that provider is, you could absolutely select that. It doesn't need to match.
Okay. All right. So remember what we're doing here is just cleanup of the cleanup of the demo instance. It's not related to Service Bridge. So we're taking Julie out of the customer approvers group. So you're removing that group and you're saving. And then you're going in to her roles. And you are doing an edit and deleting all her current roles. And then you need to do a save because you're removing the external role. You can't add the internal role until you save after you delete the external role. So she's got a blank roles now. She's got blank groups. Now we're going to add back in the internal roles that we want her to have for the demo. So you edit the roles and we're going to give her the ITIL role. We're going to give her the SNC internal role. And we will give her the SNSB admin role. This is the Service Bridge role that the Service Bridge admin on the consumer instance needs to have. The other role that you'll see in a minute, this requester role, is the role that we would want anybody who's doing remote catalog requests to have. There's also a remote task creator. You can create remote tasks on the consumer side as well. Julie's going to be doing our remote tasks, and she's admin, so she doesn't need to have that remote task creator role, but that's there to use as well. So Julie's left with the ITIL role, the internal role, and the SNSB admin role, and then save. Okay, and that's Julie. So the other user that we're going to use in the demonstration is Alex Ray. So if you go back to the users table and search for Alex, and then edit Alex and edit his roles. All we're doing here is adding the requester role to Alex. and then saving. So that takes care of the roles. All right. So for those of you that are still waiting on your registration task, is anybody still not at close complete? Or Amy, did you were you able to get yours working?
No, not yet. Maybe at the break.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move on and we'll take a break after we do the entitlements, since it's been about an hour, and give you guys time to
Now,
make the remaining
yeah.
issues. Yes, Rahul?
Hello. So Alex will have now two roles, right? WM agent and requester.
For service bridge purposes, the only service bridge role we gave him was requester.
Okay. So should I remove because WM underscore agent is already there with.
No, it's fine. He can have other roles as well. We just need to have
Okay.
he needs to have the requester role so that he can make remote catalog requests.
Right. Okay. Okay. Fine.
Service bridge.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Phil, when I tried doing it again, it still didn't work. So I'm going to try a third time. But do I need to be in the same browser for Julie and for admin, or two separate browsers?
For ease of doing the demo, have them in the same browser. You can certainly do it in separate browsers, because in the real world, you know, it would be
Right.
two different people working in two different places. But for your demo, keep it in both browsers.
Hey Phil, sorry, I missed that last one on Alex as well, because I actually can't see it in my lab guys, because it seems your one you're looking at there is different to mine. But what was that last one? It was SB underscore. It was this basically the service bridge requester role, right? That we're adding.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
SN_SB requester. Sorry.
Cool.
And in the lab guide, it should be in section 5.1 toward the end.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, while you guys are working that, I'll ask. So Ryan, we had some folks that were doing the registration in different browsers, and when they put in the connection link into the consumer browser, it was asking them to log in, and that's complicated here because I don't actually know what Julie Lewis's login credentials are, because we were trying to do impersonate user. But any advice on how to handle the logins, or actually what it's doing behind the scenes when you put that link in?
Yeah, and it's particularly relevant when, if you're doing demos or if you control both of the instances. When you create the registration on the provider side, what it essentially does is it creates a login page to complete the registration, and it's restricted to the contact that is selected within the registration record. So that's the only user that will be able to access it. Anyone else will get an error message. So if you control both instances, one of the things we say is, doing the impersonation of that user before, because then you're already authenticated into the provider instance. And when I say impersonation, it's the impersonation of that registration contact on the provider instance. That way you're already authenticated on the provider instance. And when you click on that link and hit connect to provider from the consumer, then you don't need to perform that authentication. If you use two completely separate browsers, with like incognito or something along those lines, then when you click on that link to connect to provider, you will need to authenticate on the provider instance as that contact. If you had this in a real life situation where the consumer instance is a customer, that would be that registration contacts that customer. That would be the login that they use to get into the provider instance. So that's really what you would see in a real life workflow is you as an admin on the provider side create that registration. You send that over to the customer. They're in their instance. They will go ahead and click on that link, creates the provider connection record. They hit connect to provider, and then it redirects them to the provider page where they will then log in using their credentials on the provider instance, and then hit the authorized for the OAuth. So really, from a demo perspective or, testing where you control both instances, you just need to authenticate as that registration contact on the provider instance, whether that's through impersonation or if it's in a completely separate window, you'll just need to do the login as that contact.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a lot more clear than my explanation. Thanks. All right. So let's talk about entitlements. So all the stuff that we did yesterday, all the stuff that we said is going to go over to the consumer, those things all go over as entitlements. And if you look at the registration record now that exists, if you go into Service Bridge Consumer, you look at provider connections, you'll see you've got an active connection now to the provider. And if you open that connection, there's an entitlements related list. Now it's blank. We're not sure why, but in these demo instances, the entitlements aren't automatically coming across. So we've got an extra step here that we've got to do to get the entitlements across. And I've got the dev team actually trying to figure out why it's not happening. But to get those entitlements across, what we're going to do is, and I think we put this extra step in. I think Mark put it in the guide. If we go to the provider instance and end your impersonation of Julie Lewis, if you have not already. So that you're logged in as admin.
Mine weren't blank just as this is loading, just to make a note. I have all the entitlements generated on the first look.
And see, sometimes it does it, sometimes it don't. So if it doesn't, so if your entitlements is blank, go to your provider instance, go under Service Bridge Provider, Consumers. We now have a consumer that we set up, and you'll see that there's for those of you that got the registration process to work, you'll see there is a consumer connection now. We are connected to Boxio. Click on that number and it will open up the connection. You will see, for whatever reason, the entitlements are blank on the provider as well. So what we need to do on the provider instance under the consumer connection, there's a related link, refresh entitlements. And if you hit refresh entitlements, you will see all the entitlements, the things we requested today will now appear in the entitlements related list. And they will show up as pending. It takes a few minutes, but in a few minutes, they will go from pending to the personas should show active, and then the others will show inactive, and we'll have to activate them on the consumer side. So I think it's going to.
I'm sorry, I don't have the refresh entitlements option.
Did you end your impersonation as Julie?
Yes.
You wouldn't be able to get there.
But
Does anybody else not see refresh entitlements? Okay. Are you on your provider instance, Valeria? Because you would not see it on your consumer instance.
okay, but I don't, when I search for provider connections, okay, consumer, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, I was searching for provider connections on the provider instance, so I didn't see that.
Okay. Yeah, so if you go under consumers and you open the consumer connection, then you'll see refresh entitlements there. All right, it may take a second for the entitlements to go across, so I think it's probably a good time for a break. So
yeah, Phil, I was just going to add on one thing just on this, the entitlement portion. This was what we covered yesterday on one of the slides around the consumer criteria process of how it does this evaluation of the entitlements being generated. So the consumer criteria, this process runs, I forget the exact time, it's like 2 a.m. in the morning that it runs as a scheduled job every day to update the entitlements across the board. If you have a consumer criteria that's looking, as we were talking about, different metadata, like a contract, it will see, all right, has any contracts changed, and based off of those changes, and it will update the entitlements appropriately. So that process runs automatically every night. So in day-to-day use, there shouldn't be the need to refresh the entitlements. It should trigger as well, if some of the content, like a remote record producer, a new one is generated. And then it knows that, okay, that there's a new content. Let's evaluate that for the entitlements as well. And so you have the option to do it here. And then I believe as well on the provider record too, there is a refresh entitlements, which will then perform that entitlement refresh for every connection instead of doing it on a one-off basis. So you have the option to refresh entitlements on an ad hoc basis, either on an individual consumer connection or on the provider record itself, which will refresh it for every consumer connection, which is within the instance.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. All right. I refreshed my screen and mine are now not pending, but let's take a 10-minute break, and I want to spend that time with those who don't have their connection yet to try to get them up and get them back with everybody else. So please come back on at 10 after the hour, and we will start again. And anybody who's still having connection issues, stay on, and Ryan and I will help work through, see if we can get you up. Okay. All right. Amy, are you still having issues?
No, I was able to connect. So the first time it probably was that save issue that caused, I don't know if that is definitely it, but I am able to connect. The
Okay.
second time I tried it, I had two browsers and I was logged into the second browser as admin. So that was that set. You described that. I just wanted to make sure that within the lab guide, I did the entitlements. So is that where we left off, or should I continue to add service bridge roles? You haven't done that yet, right?
No, I did the roles. So just go back to the 5.1 and add those roles. It won't take long to do
Okay.
that.
And then stop it and stop at 5.2.
Yeah. No, actually go ahead and do the first part if you need to refresh entitlements. So in the introduction to 5.2, I think, hold on a second, let me make sure we added it. Actually, I guess we didn't add it. I apologize. So go to your if you go to on your provider instance, go to consumers.
Yes.
And you'll see the consumer connection.
Yes.
Open that consumer connection up, and it'll open up your entitlements list at the bottom. Is it blank?
I think I went to the wrong place. On the provider, you go to consumer connection, and in entitlements, no, I see 5 entitlements.
Okay. Are they showing like active, inactive, inactive?
Yes.
Inactive? Okay, you're good. Then stop there and you're good. Take a break.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chris, I see you've got your hand raised. You need help?
Yeah, it's like yesterday, my connections partially worked. So, I had entitlements populated on my instance, but it was from my consumer instance, it was like my inbound status was active replication, my outbound was failing. So I went back, I deleted, both connection records, tried it again. Right now on the consumer side, my replication is active both outbound and inbound. However, on the provider instance, I've left, I'm still impersonating Julie, and I'm still showing like a work in progress. So that's been going probably 10, 15 minutes now. So I don't know if it's hung or if it's still just kind of running in the background. I noticed that, I'm not seeing any entitlements yet over on the consumer side. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay. Do you, so Ryan, I forgot to say up front, don't use the save in
Okay.
the bar at the top. So we had a couple of people that did that just out of reflex. Chris, do you know if you used the save button when you created the registration?
I use the button. I usually don't like right click and save.
Okay, so you did use the button.
Yeah, so I use the button.
Okay. Ryan, you want to have him share and see if we can?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to share a screen, we can take a quick look at it.
Yeah, Mark, can you give him access?
Yep. You should have it.
Join. So I think I can share out my screen now. Bear with me here just a second. And okay. So hopefully you're seeing my screen now.
Yep. Work in progress.
So on my provider side, I'm still logged, I'm still impersonating Julie. My consumer instance, I'm in here as admin. It looks like on the consumer side, besides not getting entitlements or anything yet, I mean, it looks like my outbound status is good, my inbound status is good.
If you open up the registration record on the provider side.
Well, before you do that, end your impersonation.
Yep.
So you're admin, just to take that out of the.
Yes.
Okay.
Good call.
I'm surprised. When you put Julie in as Service Bridge admin, did you do that on the provider instance or the consumer instance? Because Julie should not have been able to see the Service Bridge application, I don't think.
Just the registration record.
Oh, she just saw it. Okay.
So I'm on the provider looking at
so
what's going on here.
Ryan, you still there?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. Yeah, it's not sure why it's on. We see the RPS connection is set up, so it started doing the configuration. So it moved just from an open into work in progress status. There is something with the workflow on this registration that's not completing this. If you click on if you just go back to Service Bridge and go to consumers, looking at this, assuming it's made the consumer record. Okay, click on that 1003.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and you just delete this.
Okay.
Box you and open this up. This one up real quick. board, we have entitlements, we have RPS connection. Let's go back to, if you go to the registration.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think this will do it, but open this up and then just type anything into the short description and hit update. You can just type anything exactly. I'll give it a moment to see if that pushes along. I don't think it's going to, but give it a shot before deleting it. Yeah, let's just hit refresh or either open up the registration record or hit refresh in this. And I don't think this is going to move along, but
Worth a try.
exactly. All right. One last thing, go back to the consumers on the provider instance. So on the provider instance is the consumer's records, and we're going to open up that record for Boxio.
Okay.
Yep, and open that up. And in the related list down below, there's the last tab is RPS connections.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and click on that. All right. Inbound, outbound is active. All right, so there's no errors here. You could hit back here. We'll go back to the consumer record. And the last thing I'm going to try before we just delete the records and then just restart it is just to click on, refresh entitlements here on the related links. And we can also click on test connection on the page over on the consumer instance. Give it a moment to do that to see if that pushes that over. And then you can just go ahead and refresh the pages on both instances. Nope. Okay. So what we're going to want to do, actually, let me message you. So Phil, I'm thinking the best thing here is just to do the demo reset.
Yeah, why don't you guys do that in the background?
Yep.
Okay.
So Chris, I'm gonna message you and I will send you something over now.
Okay.
All right, Bobby, you have your hand raised.
Yes, hi, Phil. I just see 3 entitlements and not 5, and 2
Which
of
ones,
them inactive.
which ones do you see?
I see entitlements, case to incident, server change request, and admins.
Server change requests and customer and the admins?
Yes, customer admin, submit a server change request, case to incident. These 3 entitlements, not 5. And on my consumer instance, 2 of the, the entitlements in the connection is with the warning sign.
Yes, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So, so you're not seeing a customer and a customer admin persona?
I see customer admins, but I don't see customer persona.
Okay. Let me share my screen again. Hold a second. So I think for your you're seeing submitted server change requests and not the printer issue one.
Yeah, not the printer issue.
Okay, so I think the printer issue is probably you didn't activate your remote catalog entry. So if you go to remote catalog items
Mm-hmm.
and open up the report a printer issue,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm doing, if you're watching my screen,
Yep.
then do you see an activate button up at the top right?
Let's see. Activate. No, I see update and publish.
Publish, yeah. Hit
But
publish.
the
So
rate
it's not
is
showing
stuck.
up because you didn't publish it.
So I need to publish it.
Yes. Now for your admin, go to the catalog personas module in the
Mhm.
Surface Brick Provider application.
Mhm.
Do you see two?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I'm not sure why you would only see one of those as a
Because maybe it was associated consumer registration.
do you mind sharing your screen?
I'll do that, right? Let me,
Let's take a look at that one.
I think I would need some access to share, right? Oh, I see now 5.
Okay, you see them all. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
All
that
right.
would-
Anybody else having an issue with connecting? Everybody connected at this point except Chris.
I'm still having issues with the entitlements. I don't see them.
Okay.
Mm.
How
right.
to Phil, how about the ones which are in warning state at consumer instance?
I'll show you that in a few minutes. Pallavi.
Okay, sure.
We'll get to that. All right. Valeria, on your provider instance,
Yes.
if you go to consumers and open the consumer connection, you're not seeing anything in entitlements.
Consumers. Okay. Wait. It's loading. Just
Okay.
a second. No, I don't. I will refresh.
Okay.
Okay, now it works. But the thing is that this step is not in the guide. So I was following the guide and
I thought I
the
put it
guide
in.
points use
I
the
will
consumer
we'll update.
instance.
That's fine. We'll update the guide and let me see.
Okay, so let's see if now I need to go on to the consumer instance and see if
It'll take a few minutes. They show pending right now, probably on your provider instance. In a few minutes, they will go across and an update on your consumer instance.
okay, so the next steps are on the consumer, right? As I see in the guide.
Yep.
Okay. That's good.
All right. Mark, I could have sworn we put the refresh entitlements in the guide somewhere, but I don't see it. I wonder if I deleted it by accident.
I saw it at some point. I remember doing it, following the guide, but it may have been like a small line somewhere.
Yeah, it probably is.
I thought we had a screenshot, but maybe it's not in there anymore. We can re-add it.
Yeah. All right. I'll make a note. We'll fix that before the next boot camp. So sorry if that's caused issues with anybody. All right. So we've got we should have the entitlements over on our consumer instance. If it's not showing up, refresh your screen and they should show up. All right, we're at section 5.2 in the guide now. So now we'll deal with Pallavi's issue of the caution sign that shows up. So Personas are just information that come across. So you'll see they don't have the caution sign in front of them. What that means, what the caution sign means is that there's somebody on the, like, we're not going to allow a provider to just push information to a consumer instance and it show up on their instance, right? Somebody on the consumer side needs to review it and make sure that it's okay. So they need to activate the entitlements. And that caution sign means that those entitlements have not yet been activated. So we need to activate each one. The first thing we'll do is activate our remote catalog items, which show up as remote record producers in the entitlements list. So if you click on one of the entitlements, and I'll do report a printer issue first, you'll see it comes up. And the consumer can now review. What's coming across. And in the guide, it talks about the different related lists and what they have access to. So as it says, the variable catalog UI policies available for and not available for, those are all things that can be set on the provider side. They're here on the consumer side just for information. So it's just for them to go in and review. If there's any catalog UI policies or available for, not available for, those all things are set on the provider side and they're there for information. Categories. So the default category for remote catalog items is Solana, and the default catalog is a service catalog. Those can be changed on the consumer side. We're not going to change them in this one, but if the consumer wants them to appear somewhere else, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a few minutes, they can make that change. So those are the things, kind of things that they would review. So once they've reviewed that, then they activate. And once you activate, you'll see that caution sign goes away in the list. So do your remote report a printer issue and then go in and do the same for submit a server change request. Don't do the remote task yet. We'll do that one in a second. All right. So both of our remote record producers are now activated. Now we're going to activate the remote task definition, and this one is a little different. So if you click on remote task definition, remember when we set up the remote tasks, we said the outbound fields on the provider side are going to be the inbound fields on the consumer side. And the outbound fields on the consumer side are going to be the inbound fields on the provider side. So you'll see the fields that you created, and the consumer can alter those. The thing we need to do is to create a trigger. So on the consumer side, what will trigger this remote task? What will make a remote task be created? So we're going to create a very simple trigger, and we'll demonstrate it in a few minutes. We're going to say, if the assignment group, and remember, this is a case to incident tasks. So it's case on the provider side, incident on the consumer side. So the trigger condition is going to reference the incident fields because that's what we're creating on the consumer side. We're going to say if the assignment group for the incident is network support, then that is going to trigger a remote task to be created and be sent to the provider. So once you put that trigger in, then activate the remote task. And you'll see the review comes up of the field mappings and when they're going to sync. And we say, okay. And that's all our entitlements. Now go back to your provider connection where the entitlements list was at. And we're finally going to get to this authorized user thing that we talked about. Remember, we created the catalog personas, and if you click on the catalog persona list, you'll see those transferred over. So those personas are there. Remember, we assigned catalog items to the personas. So there was one catalog item for the customer persona, one was for the customer admin persona. Click on the authorized users list. So when the connection is made, one of the things Service Bridge does is it takes all of the consumer, the contacts for the company on the provider side, and it automatically creates authorized user records for those. So it does that as a convenience. So these are all users that were listed as customer contacts for Boxio on the provider instance, on the Solana instance. So it creates authorized user records for those. So that just as a convenience, so you don't have to. It assumes that those people would potentially be authorized users. But you can add new authorized users as well. So we're gonna do two, but as those authorized users are not active when they come over. So somebody on the consumer side still has to activate those authorized users. So the first activation we're going to do is Julie. So remember, Julie is our admin. She was the customer contact. If you click on the active field for Julie Lewis, it will open up her record. And we're gonna do two things. We're gonna add personas for Julie, and we're gonna add both of personas. We want Julie to be able to access all the items. So we'll say Julie's going to be a customer and a customer admin persona. So Julie has two personas. And then we're going to click on the activate button to activate Julie as an authorized user.
Phil, I have a question on remote task definition, case to instant.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the consumer side, for the remote task definition, case to instant, the simple trigger is assignment group is network support. So which means it's automatic. From consumer side to provider side, it's automatic. If any incident got created with this assignment group, we are going to create a provider task. But when it comes to provider instance, so the trigger, there is no trigger as such. It doesn't seem to be automatic.
Right. We'll get to that. We will create a trigger for that.
Okay. Okay, cool.
In a few sections. Good question, though.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that's Julie. Remember Alex Ray. We're gonna add Alex Ray as an authorized user because I want to use him as an example. So if you go in, add a new authorized user, we'll make Alex Ray, and we're gonna make Alex just the customer persona because I want you to be able to see how the personas work. So we're gonna make Alex just the customer persona. And we will submit Alex as a new authorized user. And he will go in as activated when we submit him. So we've got two authorized users. We've got Julie Lewis, and Julie is a customer and a customer admin persona. And we've got Alex Ray, and Alex is just the customer persona. Okay. You'll see in the guide, there's a section 5.4 for create transforms. I included that just we're not going to do that on the consumer side, but I wanted to make sure you were aware that consumers can create transforms on their instance as well. So it's not just the provider that can transform the data. The consumer can also transform the data in the remote tasks. So that is an option, but that we're not going to explore. But it is part of the Service Bridge consumer application. You'll see under administration, there's a transforms module that they can use.
Yeah, and Phil, I would just add onto that. We were talking about a little bit yesterday with remote task, versus remote record providers and scalability. Do you have to create a different one for every customer? And so the ability for a customer to have transforms on their instance, that could be a situation where if you wanted to create a remote task definition that's used across multiple customers, where you can send over the customer, multiple different fields, and then leave it optional, for the customer if they want to use those. So with the ability to change mappings and transformations on their side, they could then take that data, as a provider, you're sending over to them, and essentially do with it what they would like. You might not take, that information or other pieces then back in to the provider instance, or at least into the process. So you can leave it as a little higher level process. But this would be just an example, or the transforms would be a great use case of where you want to create a remote task definition and maybe make the what's going to be working bidirectionally in the process integration pretty generic, but then can give them additional information that they could then map or transform into their system if they want to bring in additional details. So a way that you can make it more scalable instead of creating things on an individual one-off customer basis.
Yep. Thank you, Ryan.
I have a question. So these remote task definitions, we can use them also outside of the catalog items we are creating, right? To sync an incident with a case, for example, because not necessarily the incident is created through a portal.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Valeria. Try again.
So if I understand correctly, now we were yesterday as well, we created some kind of catalog items, some record producers.
Mm-hmm.
For the consumer instance to open incident in case a printer is broken or a server is broken.
Right.
Okay. To push on the catalog of the consumer instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily I open an incident through the catalog. So can I use a remote task definition to open an incident from somewhere else? I don't know if this makes sense.
So what you're saying is if you open it, if an incident was opened from the portal, could you?
If it's not.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I wonder is, like, what happens if it's not open from the portal?
So remote task definitions are not related to the portal at all. Remote record producers are portal. Remote task definitions, you'll see in the example when an incident is opened on the consumer instance and we trigger it using the trigger that we defined, that will kick off a remote task record that will go over to the provider instance, and it will open a case on the provider site. So the remote record producers and remote task definitions really are two different things.
Okay.
And let's get to the examples, and if it's still not clear to you after the examples, then we can talk about it again.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel real quick on the authorized users, at first I saw the approval status was requested, and then I refreshed and showed it shows approved. Is that an automatic thing? And what are the different statuses for approval status?
Great segue. Well, you saw the two statuses. Out of the box, approvals are automatic. But if you go to section 5.5, again, we're not doing anything in this section, but I wanted you guys to look at the settings. So on the consumer side, if you go to the related list for settings, you'll see the settings that are part of the applications. One of the settings is you can have remote record producers be automatically activated You can have remote task definitions to be automatically activated. There's a setting on the provider side, which we didn't look at. I'm not going to go look at it at this point, but there's also settings on the provider side. One of the settings on the provider side is auto approve authorized users. So the provider can say, I want to approve every authorized user. And that's a setting they have on the application. Out of the box, it's not turned on. So out of the box, it does go over to the provider side, but the setting on the provider side says automatically approve these, so it comes back approved. There's no action that's required. But you can on the provider side require that each one be approved. That would be a pain, but I would guess if you had very restrictive remote catalog items that you wanted only certain people to have access to, that you would want to turn that on.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Now we get to actually using the stuff that we created. So we're connected.
I'm sorry, Phil, the step 5.5, we didn't have to do anything. It's just for our information.
Information, so you can go in and look at it, make sure you know what's there. All right, now we move on to section 6, and we're going to actually demonstrate the capabilities of all the stuff that you've set up and you've approved. And you guys are SCs, you're experts, so don't feel like you've got to follow my directions explicitly in opening cases and stuff like that. But I put the information in there just for those that might need the help. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate proactive case creation. In some of the presentations, we talk about it as proactive advisory or proactive tasks. Out of the box, we have a capability, doesn't require any configuration on the provider side, that when you create a case and you make the channel an alert channel for a Service Bridge connected customer, and you enter that customer, it will send a provider task over to the consumer proactively. So the use case for this, and I try to put a use case in for each one of these so you could get an idea. A use case for this is the provider has something that they need to inform the consumer about. And a lot of providers now, they use email or they use phone to alert a consumer of something, and it's slow. There's errors involved. People don't check their voicemail. People don't check their email all the time. One of our MSPs that I was talking with several months ago, they've been playing around with Service Bridge. They said the first thing they were going to put in place is this proactive case creation, because they had a security monitoring service that they had. They were using email and phone calls to alert when there was an issue. They were going to put proactive case in place so that they can make it systematic and measurable, right? When you send something in the system, you can automate around it, you can measure it, you can see when it was sent, when it was responded to. So that's sort of the idea behind the proactive case creation. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in to our provider instance, and I'm going to impersonate a user called John Jason. You can do these as admin if you want. I put in users just so you can see that that normal users can use this stuff. And when you're demoing, you want to choose regular users rather than doing everything as admin. So we'll impersonate John Jason. Maybe. Here we go. Excuse me. I'm going to go into the CSM workspace. And I'm going to open a new case. So the two important things when you enter the case, the channel for the case needs to be alert. That's the trigger. The trigger is channel is alert, and the account needs to be Boxio. So it is a service bridge connected account. And then I just put some sample text in there. You can use that or put whatever you want in the short description, just something that you recognize. And then those are the only 3 fields you really need. And then you do a save. And actually, I'm going to go to full screen so I can actually see all my buttons here. And we'll save. And then we're going to go over to the consumer side. And we're going to impersonate Julie, our favorite customer contact. On the consumer side. So we're logged in on the provider as John Jason. And we're logged in on the consumer as Julie. Now, when a proactive case is kicked off, it emails the notifies whatever notification method there is. It notifies the customer contact. So Julie will be getting some notification that there's been a proactive task that's been generated. And what Julie will do, and I don't have it as a favorite for Julie, so we'll go in to Service Bridge. If you go into Service Bridge Consumer app and choose Provider Tasks, and of course, it's not working on mine today. Let's see, did we save that? We put it in as alert. And account didn't go in for some reason. Let's try that again. I must not have clicked on it correctly. So let's.
Yeah, I believe actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think you'll have to create a new one because I think the trigger condition on this is only on insert. I don't know if it covers it on update.
Yeah, so hopefully you guys, I don't know what mistake I made, but hopefully you guys didn't make the same mistake. So we'll do a new one. And we'll choose alert. And we'll make sure that Boxio actually goes in this time. I'll do a save. And get rid of all those alerts. Now let's go back to Julie and see what happens on Julie's side. Now, I'm going to go. So we've got an alert. Is anybody else having this issue besides me? It wouldn't be good if.
Mine went through. I had the case on both instances.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on mine.
I can see provider task.
All right,
I can see the provider task if I'm signed in as an admin, but as Julie Lewis, I can't see the service bridge menu. So I think I've maybe missed to give her a specific role.
All right, that's a good catch. So we do have a provider task on the provider side. Let's go over, and maybe that was the issue. Maybe when I created roles, I didn't give her the admin role. I'm going to end the impersonation on the consumer side, and let's see if I've got the same situation.
It is seen only under provider task, not under case, right?
Yes. So it goes over to the consumer instance. Yeah. So it did come over. So I may not have done something correct with Julie's roles, but I'm not going to go try and fix that because of the time. I want to make sure we've got plenty of time to go through the detailed stuff that Ryan's going to go through. But the proactive case, it does go over to the consumer instance as a provider task. And the customer contact who's identified for the consumer is notified of the fact that it has gone across. The intent is and when we talk about it, what we talk about with the customers is the opportunity now that you've systematically extended your control of the workflow. So now you've got a workflow item now that goes over to the consumer instance, and the consumer can potentially build workflows on their side to react. So when I get a provider task that has this in the description or whatever, they could kick off a workflow then to do something. Maybe it scrambles their major incident management team, or if it's a security thing, maybe it scrambles their security team. So there's a lot of possibility now because you're proactively alerting them of them then automating workflow within their instance. So you're extending your workflow automation from the provider into the consumer instance. So hopefully you guys are working ahead. I mean, in this try it out section, you guys are free to do whatever you want. But so I've got things to try. So in the provider task, I can put comments in. Work notes don't go across. We think that's that's kind of the sausage factory stuff. We don't necessarily want to expose those to customers, but additional comments are customer visible. So you can put in additional comments in the provider task on the consumer side. And you'll see those go back across to the case. I didn't put a short description on my last one, so it's showing up as blank, but so I opened up the case on the provider side, and you can see the comment that we put in the provider task on the consumer instance has now come across to the case on the provider instance. So the consumer and the provider can trade comments, can collaborate. When the provider has questions or the consumer has questions, they can put those in. And that's consistent as we talk about the remote catalog items and the remote tasks as well. You'll see that the provider can put in, the consumer can put in comments, the provider sees them, the provider puts in comments, the consumer sees them. So play around, you can change the priority on the provider instance. See, that's changed on the consumer instance. You can put in resolution code, resolution notes, close the case, and you'll see the state changes on the consumer instance. We'll give you a few minutes to play around with that.
Just one question, Phil. That so as we said, on a consumer instance, it is always visible under provider task, right? Because we created, it's not going into your usual case table or usual case records, right?
Right.
So when agent say working on a consumer instance, right, or a admin working on consumer instance, he need to monitor both the queues, right? Case and provider task both. They won't suffice. If they monitor only case, that won't suffice them.
No, right? I don't think I would advise that. I would say that if that was something that was put in place, then the customers would want to put a workflow in so that those provider tasks would pop up on whoever's queue is necessary on the consumer side. So they're not having to monitor different things.
Yeah, I'd say you could do it either way, depending upon what the process is within the consumer side. The example that we have right now of what our ServiceNow from a data center side is working on with some of our data center colo providers is having the provider task that's going to be coming in. So if they get a change notification or an alert or whatever else, today that's in email, it's a big pain and manual process for them, and so they're going to have them come in. They will connect them with a workflow to put it into a destination place. I'd say it depends on probably the maturity of the customer as to what they're where they're going to have it. So there's nothing out of the box. It's probably something that we'll be adding later to have a a light touch integration where realistically, probably the most that it's going to offer is for a customer to associate it to an existing record and then have comments passed back and through, because we really want provider task to continue to exist as something that's highly scalable. If you think about that example with the data center, the data center colo provider wants to be able to send that information out to hundreds or thousands of different customers. So they don't want to have we want to leave that provider task record as that very light touch approach and highly scalable.
Right.
So the advice I'd say is from the customer side is if they want to have that go into another process, they can, but it shouldn't be looked as the provider task being used as a real workflow integration. We would relegate that to the remote task. So they could take information. Chris, you had asked some about this yesterday. There is one of the features we'll be talking about is the Scratchpad API. So there's a Scratchpad API to be able to add in different variables or key value pairs via API into the service bridge record. So you could pass variables over that way. And so you could send information over with it and kind of let the customer do with it as they will, but not have the expectation that they're going to really respond back with anything more than comments, which is really what that provider task is going to do. It can pass over state as well. It does state, short description, and comments. But I'd say probably in most situations, we're going to see that the provider is not going to have the state actually pass back through and update the process on their side, as it's really more of a inform and conversation in terms of process of what's going to pass through. So that's what I would say. And so, back to your question, I think we will see a lot of the consumers, use a workflow to connect that to another record.
Right. No, because this will be the one of the channel, right? So service bridge is one of the channel to report a case. So there might be other channels such as, say, REST integration with some other system, then emails, or maybe a manual way, right? So all those channels cases will be seen in the case table, right? In the configurable workspace thing. But only with the service bridge, we can see this task is provider task. So I think, as you said, workflow is necessary.
Yeah,
in those cases.
so I think one thing to consider is we really only present this proactive case thing as a notification, a way of notifying, right? If
Right.
you wanted to pass a case, you would use remote task,
Right.
to pass that, and then it would show up as a case, right? So it really is a business process issue,
Right.
as Ryan said.
But
Okay.
if you use the remote task, the trigger needs to be on the consumer instance. Or is there a way where the trigger can be on the producer instance?
It can be on both, and you'll see that in a few minutes when we get to that piece.
Okay, that's nice.
Okay.
I have a
All right.
question.
Hey, Ryan, I've got somebody, Thomas, recognized an open question here that the contact on the remote catalog items is not coming over as the person that put in the request on the consumer side. They got ahead a little bit. You want to speak to that? I know that's an issue that we've been bouncing around.
Yeah, to be honest, I have to say I'm not 100% familiar with it. I believe that when you have the catalog, if you have the person that says an authorized user, it will pass that over as the requested person. But to be fair, let me get a better answer for that and come back to you with the exact details on that rather than making assumptions.
Satya, I saw you pop up. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So thanks, Phil. On the proactive case creation. So this proactive case creation, I believe, has nothing to do with the configurations that we did. If we open consumer connection on the provider side, we have created remote record producers, we have created remote task definitions, and we created catalog personas. But so this proactive case creation was independent of those and it just via flow. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, that is correct. It is out of the box. It doesn't require any configuration on the provider side, as I said.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the flow that's in there, exactly as you said, it's a flow. There is a flow that's in there. It runs as a full flow, and then has a trigger condition that's on there. So if you go in there and look at the proactive provider case, there is a flow, and that can be used as a template essentially to create additional trigger conditions, and populate additional fields within there. You can make a copy of it. It has a default condition, or a default check, I should say, where it will go ahead, perform a validation, that the customer that is there has an active service bridge connection. And then from there, it has a create provider task action that's within there and has all the fields that are mapped out. And so that's a location as well that you could use, additional fields within the record to go ahead and be able to pass additional information over.
Got it. So, but actually, so in my opinion, so it is it is like completely different from service bridge. Ideally, we shouldn't be combining this with service bridge. It is actually a simple integration between two service instances with a simple REST, but the trigger is just a flow. So, in my opinion, so it is completely.
But it does use service bridge. It doesn't. If you didn't have service bridge installed, that would not work.
Yeah, so got it. So no extra configuration is needed. In simple, we can just simply utilize the out-of-box flow. So
exactly, the flow serves as the trigger to create the provider task, and then the rest of the service bridge code, flows, business rules, whatever else it might be, handles the processing. So it'll take that provider task, send it into the service bridge queue, do the replication over to the other instance, and then through the service bridge code or product on the consumer side, then take that from the queue, create the provider task, and so on.
Okay. Now on the consumer side, so consumer will receive a provider task. So with this proactive case creation, is it like customers? What is end user's use case? Customer is going to create a proactive case on their consumer instance using the task they received.
Yeah, so that's what we were just discussing. From the consumer side, you're going to probably see a few different scenarios. We've had customers, where they are taking that information and then connecting it to an existing record so that then comments can pass through. There's other customers that are probably in the less mature state where they're leaving it in a provider task and they're just viewing that within the larger queue, or they're just creating a queue or a dashboard where they're looking at tasks, and the provider tasks are one of them that they're bringing in for notification. So I think that it'll be and a lot of this is probably going to be dependent upon the usage of the provider, with the provider task and how they're going to use it. There could be some that are sending those out as, they're sending out alerts, as example, or a change, or they're sending it out there as just going to be a case, or it could be something that it's, a expiration of warranty information. If you think of a hardware vendor, your device is end of life. And so there might be something that comes into more of the asset management side. So there's a number of different use cases, and from a service bridge product side, we'll be continuing to develop more, with using that. But just as an example, right now we're working on things within the asset management side. So as you have, things with like zero touch refresh, that it will have, out of the box integration with that to be able to kind of use these records and tie directly into other existing applications. So we'll see continued expansion of it. I'd say today, with that, it's probably very dependent upon how the provider is using that provider task as to, where that is going to go. So, example that we have today is, they're doing POC within Now Support where they're using provider tasks and sending it out. So, if someone generates a case, now that creates a provider task on the other side. And I think exactly to the example kind of given earlier, on the consumer side, they're then connecting that provider task to an existing incident or case or whatever it might be, the record that they're using on there. And it's really just being used to supplant the need to replace the need to use email communication back and forth, because from a customer of ServiceNow and now support, they have an issue with ServiceNow. And so there was probably most likely either a case or an incident on their side. And now they're using the provider task to be able to bridge the communication. So now the comments are flowing back and forth. So it will be dependent upon the use case on the provider, but we will also have more out of the box use cases and integrations with other applications so that can be used to connect directly to it.
All right. Pallavi, you have a question?
Yes, well, on the same topic, the discussion that we're having right now, just trying to understand the task that got created on the consumer instance. It says that it's opened by Solana Service Bridge Integrator.
Mhm.
And what I understood that it is not dependent on all the configurations that we did so far on the provider instance. Does that also mean that for this to work, there was no registration required?
No,
Because
that's what I was saying a few minutes ago. It requires Service Bridge. It uses Service Bridge connection. It uses the provider task table that's installed with Service Bridge. So you have to install Service Bridge. You have to have a Service Bridge connection in order for this to work.
okay, so the registration that we established between Solana and Boxio should have been done for this to work.
Yes.
Yeah, but it does not refer any of the remote task and the definitions and the catalog personas that we created.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, Rahul?
Yeah, so maybe not a right time, but the remote catalog will generate a provided task, right? And not the remote task.
That's
Am I
correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So we might see a use case later, but we'll ask
Yeah, well,
afterwards.
that's so let's move on. And so does anybody else have any questions, or is anybody still struggling with anything on the proactive case piece?
I think maybe as a follow-up, it would be good to explain the contact that is being used here, because on the remote task, right, the caller/contact, because we set a transform rule, then the contact came through as Alex Ray. But when the previous exercise, when a remote catalog item was being used, Alex was the one that was utilizing the remote catalog, but then it came through as Julie in the provider instance. So it would be good to explain if this is a default behavior of remote catalog, or if this is a setting that maybe could be changed so that the correct requester comes through, because I can see how this actually becomes an issue.
Yeah. So Ryan's gonna look into that and better understand, because I've recognized it comes across as the contact for the account. And
yeah, I'll put together in the slides that we have going out, and we'll put together, give me a little bit of time, but I'll put together a couple of slides to show the exact behavior of how that works differently between remote task and remote record provider, and with and without authorized users.
Yep. Okay.
Hey,
All
Ryan,
right.
on that topic, I threw into the Q&A session kind of the gist of why that's the case and what's going on the back end. So
Thanks,
you can,
Chris.
yeah, no worries.
Yeah, Chris has been struggling with this one on one of his implementations. And one of the things that that is being worked that will hopefully address this is there is an auto populate setting on the variables that right now, if you put something in there, it doesn't actually work. But once that is fixed, then that will allow you to auto-populate a field with the submitter name and submitter contact information, and that could come back across as part of the record, but it's not there yet. All right, let's move on to ordering remote catalog items for those of you who have not already. So I think the thing I wanted to demonstrate for remote catalog items is the personas in play. So we're going to log into the consumer instance, and we're going to start up the service portal window, or you can just do /sp if you want to bring up the service portal in the window that you're in. And then we're going to impersonate Julie Lewis. This is just for demonstration purposes of the personas. We'll demonstrate Julie, and we'll go back to the service portal window and refresh so that we're in Julie's view of the service portal, and choose request something. And you'll see in the categories, there's a provider services category. You open that up and you will see Solana. So a consumer can have multiple providers. So they may have multiple providers here if they're connected to multiple providers using Service Bridge. In this case, we've only got one. It's Solana. As we said before, the categories are configurable. We know not all customers are going to use the service portal. We've got some that are using Employee Center, and we can actually set it up so that these items will show up in the Employee Center rather than the service portal for those customers that are using Employee Center. So when Julie chooses Solana, she sees both of the remote catalog items. Remember, Remora Printer Issue was the customer persona. Submit a server change request was the customer admin persona. She has both, so she can see both. But if we go back over to our window and impersonate another user and impersonate Alex Ray, assuming my role changes went in correctly, and then refresh the service portal so that we see Alex's view of the service portal. Remember, he only has the customer persona. So the only catalog item he can see is report printer issue, because the other one was for the customer admin persona. So when you're demonstrating to customers, you can use that to kind of show how they can control access at a user level using the personas that are set up. All right.
Hey, Philip.
Uh-huh.
I've been trying to troubleshoot it for a bit, but for some reason, I'm not seeing the provider services category show up in my list. We can tackle it later on a break or whatever, but I was just curious if anybody else was not
It's
seeing it in their
probably
list.
role related. So in your impersonation, if you're impersonating someone,
Mm-hmm.
and then see if you can see it.
Yeah, because like with Alex Ray, I can see the one that I'm supposed to see, but with Julie, I can't see anything. And I did go back and double check that she has the right roles, but is she supposed to be in any groups?
No.
Yeah, and she doesn't have any groups, so I don't know. Everything looked right on her per the instructions, but for some reason,
Keith, is this in the portal that you're seeing it?
Yeah. So
yeah, sometimes on the portal that takes longer to refresh. Sometimes I've had to log out, log back in, or potentially clear my cache in my browser for that to represent. I find that stuff will be cached sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's working for Alex, so I would think if it's working for Alex, if I have it configured properly, it should work for Julie, as opposed to, because I would assume if it's a cache issue, it wouldn't work for either of them.
I've seen it happen when you give a user a new role. I had as an example, I was working in an instance and gave someone who was supposed to be an end user a role, and it wasn't showing up until it was logging in, logging out, clearing cache. It was something weird where they had all the correct roles, but it still wasn't showing up, and it was something with just something being cached. I don't know exactly what it was, but eventually it showed up. It just took either time or for the cache potentially on the instance to maybe refresh, so that they could see it in the portal itself.
Yeah, I just killed that browser. I'll restart it again, give it a try and see if that changes anything. It's been probably 30, 45 minutes since I've looked at this, so I don't think it's just a time issue, but it could be certainly a browser or cache issue.
Yeah, so I mean, for the purposes of the boot camp, I don't think it's a big deal. You've seen how to set it up, you've seen how it works.
Yeah,
I mean, troubleshooting.
and at least Alex worked, so I know that.
So using Alex Ray, you guys put in a report a printer issue, and you'll get to see your remote choice variable at work. So if you just do that, Keith, and we can come back later if we need to and try to figure out what's going on in yours. So you see Alex, when he requests report a printer issue, the first variable that you see there is the select a printer. And if you pull down, it's going back to the provider instance, looking at that CMDB CI printer table that we set up as part of the remote choice definition and getting the printers that are for Boxio in that table and presenting them for Alex to choose. So which one has he got an issue with? And then you put in the short description and you put in the issue. And I'm not going to take the time to put in all the text, but you put those in, you'll see, remember the report a printer issue creates an incident on the provider side. So once we put that in, we go back to the provider. And I'm just going to stay logged in as admin, but you guys can log in as I don't remember who I had in the lab guide. Excuse me. Actually, I think I just said stay in as admin just to save time. But if you go in as admin and you look at the service operations workspace and then look at all incidents, you should see if the demo gods are with us, you should see that incident show up. So mine shows up as a 0001. So you see the remote catalog item you created, create an incident on the provider instance. And then you can go through the trimes, just like with proactive case, you can exchange comments. You can see state changes. You can propose a solution, and then the user has the option to accept or reject the solution in their portal view. If you happen to close out the portal view of your incident or of your request, after you put it in, you can go up to requests, and you can see it shows up as an open request. You can see the provider task, the incident number on the provider side is reflected in the portal view of the request. So the requester knows the task that was opened on the consumer side and can refer to it. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to work through some of the rest of the trimes. If you want to, I'm not going to give you time to go through the server change request. You can do that one as well as I said, it's a bonus item, but like I said, like Mark said, you guys will have these instances through Friday. So you can play around with them, try some other things. If you have questions, you can send them to Ryan or I, and we'll do our best to answer them.
I do have a quick question on the bonus item because the original worked perfectly fine, but I ran into a similar problem that someone asked earlier where I requested it as one user and it came over as another. And so that's the only, I mean, I can already tell you that's going to be something I'm going to run into in support, like 100% certain. that'll be an issue. So if you have a solution for that, or maybe if there's like something I could look at to troubleshoot why that would happen, that'd be really helpful.
Did it come over as Julie Lewis?
No, so I impersonated Julie Lewis and the consumer did the server request. That's I was hoping you were going to go through it real quick to see if you had the same thing. If you don't mind, could you do that just so we could see if it's also happening in
Well,
your
I can
version?
tell you it does. We know it. We know that's an issue. Yeah, I don't have to.
Oh, yeah. So I impersonated Julie Lewis and then it came over as Alex Ray. So that's the only thing. I'm wondering if it's maybe something to do with the impersonation, but yeah, that's what I saw.
Yeah, that's interesting that it would go over as Alex Ray. So we definitely need to get a better definition of what's happening there so that we can actually control it and change it as necessary. No idea why it would come over as Alex.
So if I can make, a comment from the SE side, from the sales side, these instances actually, they work for record producers and they also work for remote tasks. And specifically remote tasks is something that is very difficult to get out of Demo Hub. So I was wondering if we actually get to keep this for longer than just Friday, because I could really see how this particular remote task capability demos really well to customers in conjunction with the flow creation that is outlined in one of the exercises. And we cannot get that very easily from Demo Hub actually.
Yeah, so I don't think it's an option to keep it because these are resources the training department uses. But I'm interested as to why you don't think you can do remote task in Demo Hub.
Well, I would
Basically
say,
because their narratives are very difficult to configure, and every time I request for them to look into service bridge configuration, they take a couple of days and then they actually provide me with entirely two separate instances that are configured. So every time I need a service bridge narrative, it's not Demo Hub creates two instances, they configure them on the site, and then they send them to me. And then the only narrative that has worked with has been the remote record producers. I haven't tried it with remote tasks, but the process normally adds a week time of getting an instance that works ahead of a customer demonstration.
Yeah.
So Phil, I was
So
just gonna
I've just
say,
got two. Go ahead, Ryan.
on that, Hersta, we can sync up offline as well. There is a new Demo Hub narrative, which should be out, I think, by the 24th, I want to say, which will have more similar to this. So maybe we can review that together with that, check with the Demo Hub team, see if that's available, if we can get something spun up to test that out, and go through that and see what adjustments we need to make to it.
That sounds.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting caught up in the narratives. I mean, the main thing is to have two Demo Hub instances that have Service Bridge installed. And if you've got a Service Bridge for consumer instance and a Service Bridge for provider instance, there's no reason you can't do everything that we just did in this lab.
Yeah, I don't mean to harp on this. Just to finish this up,
yeah.
The instructions on how to set up the two instances, there is something that gets messed up between the demo instance and the instructions. So the instructions lead to a dead end for setting up the service bridge connection. So anyway, this is demo problems. It's not necessarily a service bridge problem. I realize that, but I wanted to put it on the map.
Yeah, we'll sync up, and I think that the new Demo Hub that they have coming out, the existing one is actually, I honestly don't even know if it's using the November release. It might be using Legacy. And so they have it updated with the newer version. There's some of the capabilities that came out in the February release, that before that we weren't even able to do a cloud lab because of some of the dependencies upon some of the components, and it also gave challenges within Demo Hub as well. So fingers crossed that that's going to make it a lot easier with the new release, coming up in the next 2 weeks. But let's sync on that as well and make sure that it doesn't have those dead ends, as you said. So I'll reach out to you afterwards. Let me reach out to the Demo Hub team, see when that's get an exact date of when that's going to be available, and we can set up a call to kind of go through and let's test through fire the narratives and the setup of it.
All right, guys, we're going to move forward because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Ryan. We've got a few more things to do. We want to show the remote task. We want to show the trigger that we put in place. So I'm going to keep moving. And if any of you guys are struggling, with the remote catalog. If you have questions, save those. Let's move on to remote task, and we can address them as we have time, because I want to make sure we get through the content. So with remote task, remember we set up a remote task. We set up a trigger on the consumer instance. So the first thing we're going to show is the consumer to provider remote task. So we're going to impersonate Julie Lewis. And we're going to go into the service operations workspace and create a new incident. And I'm going to take time to copy and paste. We'll just do test again. We'll put a caller in because we got to make it able. All right. So the important thing is the impact of the assignment group. So we're just going to save this incident. And if you go to Service Bridge, remote tasks, you'll see there's not a remote task that's created at this point. But if we go back and we assign this to the network support assignment group and we save, and then we look at remote tasks, you'll see it created a remote task, a remote task table. So now if we go back over to, remember we're creating a case on the provider instance with our remote task. So I'm going to go to the CSM workspace and look at the list view and all cases. I'll give it a few minutes to come over. And you'll see that the incident that I created on the consumer has come over to the provider and is opening a case, CS1003. Now in the same way that we did with remote catalog items and the proactive case, you can put in comments, pass those back and forth. They sync.
Hey, Phil.
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Could you attempt on that case? Could you attempt to propose a solution or close it? The state syncing when I did this worked for all states. Like when you assign it to yourself, the record on the other side goes to in progress, stuff like that. But it didn't go to resolved or closed on the consumer side when you propose a solution on the case on the provider side or close the case on the provider side for mine.
Okay, and it may have something to do with what we put into the simple transform. What I found was, and Ryan, I don't know, you and I talked about this. I don't know if you ever tested it, but in cases where I didn't have all the possible states listed in the transform, it didn't sync those ones that I didn't have listed. And I don't know if that's, it could have been operator error on my part, but did you ever play with that, Ryan?
No, unfortunately, I did not.
So that's something to play with that I need to test. But I think if you don't have all the states listed in your in your transform that that keeps it from updating.
Yeah, Philip, this is Keith again. In a similar matter for me, just on the very first assign to me, it put a note in the consumer instance saying the state had changed, but the actual state field never changed, kind of thing. So that was a little quirky.
Did anybody else have that issue? Okay.
So that incident is visible in the remote task for me, but not in the incident. Is that expected or?
So when you went to the list of all incidents, you didn't see it?
No, it's not there. But when I go to remote task, it's there.
Yeah. No, that's not, it should show up in your incidents. Cases. It's a case. On the provider side, remember it's incident on the consumer
Yes,
side,
yes.
case on the provider side.
Yes. Let me see. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah. Sorry. I get that confused too. So as you're playing around with the different states, I was trying to get it so you could see how the transforms that you put in work. Remember, you did a simple transform. That's the state change. Play around with that. The advanced transform, remember what I was doing was I was filling in the contact field with the caller information that came from the incident. And I've got a note in the guide. If you go to contacts under customer service, and I'll do that so you can see what I'm doing. If you go to contacts, you should see that a contact record was actually created in the contact table. There's two in here because we had, I think, I don't remember if we put that transform in as as insert and update. I think we probably did. And that was a mistake. We should have just put it as insert, because if we do it as insert and update, every time the caller transfers, every time the record's updated, it'll create another contact record. So every time we do one of these updates, Able Tutor will appear again in the contact table. So you actually see the impact of insert versus insert and update. So that's why Able appears twice here. But that's your advanced transform. The other thing to look at is your virtual transform, and again, not a very elegant example. We need to fix this, but if you look in your work notes and you see the note, the following fields were updated by, you'll see that virtual inbound field that we created, the script that you put in populated that field with virtual inbound transformation test. So that's your virtual transform at work. All right, I'm gonna let you guys play with that for a second, and then we'll move on to the one everybody asked about. How do you trigger a remote task on the provider side?
Hey Phil, quick question.
Sure.
So on the provider side, if I go to the provider tasks table, right, I can see a provider task where there is an association with the parent record. Okay, but whereas in the consumer instance, like if I go to the provider task record, I can see the provider task, but the parent is empty. And if I go to actual like incident table or something, the state field or anything is not getting updated in the parent record.
So are you looking at remote task?
Yes, I am. No, I mean like in the provider tasks, provider task.
The remote task doesn't use the provider task record. It uses the remote task record.
So let's say like if I go into the provider task record, like the first section, we have
remote catalog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
remote catalog and the short description where it says Solana has detected increased latency, the first exercise, right? So I can see there is a case got created in the consumer instance in the provider task, okay? And I don't see a parent record associated with that. But if I go to SN customer service table, I can see that case where it is not progressed. It is still stayed in the new. So the association between the provider task record and the parent record is broken, or is it expected?
Which example, what section example are you talking about?
The first one, like if you go to the first.
In the remote task section?
Yeah, this one. Yes. No, wait a second. No, not this one.
He is
Give me
looking to provide creation.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Satya.
I think Rajesh is referring to proactive case creation, which is via Flow Designer, not via.
Yeah, proactive case
Yeah,
creation.
so there wouldn't, yeah, so proactive case creation, it doesn't create a task, another task on the consumer side. It is only a provider task, so it wouldn't have a parent record on the consumer side.
Okay, but if we actually go to the parent table, right? Like let's say in this case, it's an incident. In the provider task, I can see an incident for the printer. Okay. And if I go into the incident table,
you're mixing proactive case and remote catalog. So now we're looking at the remote catalog incident.
yeah, I mean, what I mean to say is whatever you create, right? Either it is a remote catalog or either it is a proactive case, whatever it is. So we can see an actual record in the parent table, right? Like you can see it in the provider task and you can see that in the parent record as well, parent table. Like let's say in this case, it created an incident. And in the incident, it is still staying as a new.
Rajesh, when it comes to proactive case creation, so on the consumer side, there won't be any parent. So we are just creating an provider task. That's all. So it's up to customer whether they wanted to create an incident or they wanted to create a case based on the task that got created. So there won't be parent on the consumer side.
Okay, so let me continue that. So if you look at remote catalog, you're not creating a task other than the provider task. Other than the provider task, you're not creating a task on the consumer instance. So while you see the incident number in your remote catalog item request, that incident doesn't exist on the consumer instance. It only exists on the provider instance.
If you don't mind,
Rajesh, is your question about why the state is not syncing up ultimately?
No.
No, actually, if you don't mind, can I share my screen? Maybe it will be more clear.
Actually, guys, we got to have time to get through the detail. So I'm going to hold on the question. And if we have time at the end, we'll answer. If not, we can take it offline. We're just running out of time at this point. I apologize.
Yeah.
Because I want to show you guys how to create a trigger. So let's move on to the provider to consumer. So everybody wanted to know, we created this remote task. You've got a trigger that you've defined on the consumer side to send remote tasks to the provider instance. How do you do that on the how do you trigger something on the provider instance to go to the consumer instance? And that's what we do in the next test. So the next demo, you've actually need to create a trigger. And it's actually very simple. If I can do it, anybody can do it. You just own the provider instance, and you can watch my screen as I do it. On the provider instance, if you open a Flow Designer window, it's going to take a few minutes. Wow, it's taking a long time.
Yeah, same here.
Flow Designer must not like a lot of people opening it at the same time. So you do a create new. We're going to create a new flow. A flow name. I'm going to skip the description for time. We're going to run it as a system user and submit. Skip the tour. The first thing you want to do is add a trigger. And we're going to trigger when a case is created or updated. The table is going to be the case table. And then we're going to add a few filters. I'm going to get a full screen here so that we can actually see this. The first filter, we're going to say when assignment, we're going to use assignment group on this one as well. So we'll say when the assignment group is, I think network is what I had in there. Yeah. So when assignment group is network, and then we're going to, we're going to do an and criteria. So we've got when the assignment group is network and the account is Boxio. Okay. That didn't work. Try it again. All right. So here's our trigger. When a case record is created or updated on the provider instance, and the assignment group is network and the account is Boxio, then that is going to trigger something to happen. So now we define what's going to happen. We go down and choose the actions. We're going to choose action from the 3 options, and it's going to allow me to search actions. So in the installed spokes list, if you go down in the list, you'll see there's a service bridge for providers spoke. You choose that. And then within the actions for that, you will see a action, create a remote task for a consumer. So very clear. What do we want to do? We want to create a remote task for a service bridge consumer. So you create that action. And then for the task record, you go over to the pills on the right side, the little blue circles, choose case record and drag it across into the select task record box. And then we have to choose what a remote task definition is. Now, I created our remote task definition for this demo so that it could be used for both. But you could have another remote task definition that's specifically for sending a task over. If you want to do something different, if you want to go from incident to case or from incident to change or whatever, then you could have another remote task definition. But in this case, I'm just choosing case to incident. And that's it. So now all you have to do is activate. And actually it didn't take my action. So I'm going to put my action in again. Forgot to click done. All right, so what you did is you just create a flow that when a case is open, the assignment group is network support, the account is Boxio. That will trigger the remote task definition that you created in yesterday to send a remote task record across Service Bridge to the consumer to open a consumer incident record. Okay. And then once that trigger is in place, then we'll go back and demonstrate. So we'll just open a new case. On the provider side, account Boxio. And we'll make the assignment group. Assignment group is network. Remember, it's network, not network support on this side. So this is a provider test. Save it. I'm going to take a look at the remote tasks on the provider side, and we'll see that a new remote task has been created as a result of what we just did with that trigger. And now if we go over to the consumer side, and we look at incidents because we're opening an incident on the consumer side, we'll see an incident has been opened. My provider to consumer test case created, the flow created an incident on the consumer side.
Can you open that record real quick? I want to see if your caller field's empty as well.
It will
Okay,
be
good.
because we didn't, in the remote task definition that we created, we made that contact to caller inbound on the provider side. So it only is syncing one way. If we'd made it inbound and outbound, then we could have synced it to the consumer side as well.